So, and this presents some wonderful opportunities as well as some real challenges to have this much time with the folks around us who we love the most, who can also really drive us crazy too. But it presents this opportunity to really practice resilience and to figure out how we can grow together through this really challenging time. So I want to just start with brief practice. We'll just do a little visualization. So I'll just invite everyone to sit upright. And if you feel comfortable, you can allow your eyes to close. You can just enjoy the sound of the bell as it fades. And at first, just becoming aware of your body, feeling really a sense of uplift in your body. Almost as if you're seeing your body as solid and still as a mountain. And if your mind wanders off, which of course it will, you just bring it back to your body, just feeling solid, strong, and still like a mountain. Or perhaps shifting your attention now to your breath. Just feeling your breath moving in and back out. Just enjoying the gentle rise and fall of each breath, almost like they're waves in the ocean. Breath just like the waves of the ocean. Some longer, some shorter. Some rough or some smooth, but the breath just keeps coming just like the waves of the ocean. And turning perhaps toward your mind, seeing your mind like the sky, vast and open, accepting whatever clouds, thoughts, worries pass by. Your mind, like the sky, can just accept these, watch them. Always there. No matter what's happening with the clouds or the weather. And I'll just ring the bell once more. And we can bring our attention back outwards. So this is, of course, such a challenging time. And I actually thought I would think a bit about what I was going to share based a little bit on if people just, if anyone, who was here when I spoke 2 weeks ago? Was anyone here a few weeks ago? You can just wave hello or put something in the chat box because I don't want to repeat myself too much. All right, I'm not seeing, let's see, what can I see? Okay, so Someone, hi. Nope, total newbie. Okay, hello again. Nice to see you. Okay, so some new folks, some old folks. I'm having trouble figuring out my chat box. No worries. Yes, you attended. So you probably heard me talk a little bit about this metaphor of being on an airplane in turbulence. And I think this is such a helpful metaphor for us to really think about as we think about really bringing our families safely to the other side. And I heard another airplane metaphor recently where someone was talking about flying across the country with their newborn baby. And they were saying that, they were so worried and how's this all going to go? And would everyone else be happy on the airplane? And they felt so bad about it and all this stuff. And one of the other passengers looked over at them and just said, your only goal is arrival. Like that's it. You're just trying to get there. And so I think reminding all of us again that really as families, our goal is just arrival. It's to how do we get to the other side of all of this? There's going to be turbulence and all of that, right? We're not going to do our days perfectly by any means. And so how do we just get there? How do we get our families there? Get us all there safely? And the other question that I've been asking folks to consider in all these different workshops I've been doing this morning. I was doing a workshop in Argentina this morning, and and it was such an interesting question to really all think about, which is this is going to be an unforgettable experience for every person in the world. This is an unforgettable experience. And for those of us with families who we have small kids, and I've got a 5-year-old upstairs sleeping and a 2-year-old upstairs sleeping, this is going to be an unforgettable time for all of them as well. And so, what is it that we want to remember, right? What do we want to remember about this time? What do we want our kids to remember about us during this time? What kind of parent were we? How present were we? How able to respond to them were we during this time? Right? And also, how do we want to remember ourselves? How do we want other people to remember us? Right? Do we want to remember ourselves as being generous, as being kind, as kind of following the rules and doing what we're supposed to do during this time? Or do we want to remember ourselves as being selfish or being needy or being greedy or things like that? And what are we doing today that's moving us in that direction toward who we want to be at the end of this and how we want to remember ourselves? And what are the actions that we're taking today for ourselves and for our kids as well? So with that, I want to just start to turn a little bit more toward really starting with us as adults. One of the things that I think is so interesting about practices like mindfulness and other resilience practice is that they're really contagious. We know that positive emotions are contagious. When we're happy, it lifts up the people around us. When we're down, it brings down the people around us. When we're anxious, anxiety is actually one of the most contagious emotions that we have. It's also really important, I think, especially as parents in a family, to be aware of how we're managing our own anxiety, because it's particularly contagious from parents back down to kids. And so while it's important for our kids to express a full range of emotions and for us to be able to share with them a full range of emotions, it's also really important that we not show too much anxiety to our kids, right? Just like that pilot who's flying the plane, when there's turbulence, we don't want the pilot to be saying, they're really nervous about this turbulence, right? That's not going to keep everybody on the airplane calm, right? So as a mindfulness instructor, I've written a bunch of books about mindfulness with kids and consult to schools all over the place about bringing mindfulness to kids and parents. And I'm always being asked, well, what's the best way to create more mindful kids? And it's actually really pretty simple. The more I think about it, the more it becomes clear to me. But what I realized was that the opposite is definitely really clear. The best way to create stressed out, miserable kids is to surround them with stressed out, miserable adults. And so what that means is that the reverse is also true. That the best way to create mindful, compassionate, and resilient kids is to surround them with mindful and compassionate and resilient adults. And so that's really what I want to talk about, are what are the ways that we can have this start to trickle down to our kids, right? And it really does keep starting with us, like again and again. It keeps coming back to us. And then it starts to maybe then spread to the rest of our community in some different ways, to the other adults in the family or the other adults kind of around us in the community, the school teachers. What are they doing to stay well regulated so they're helping the kids stay regulated? I'm really finding, certainly on Zoom, where so many of us are spending our time in big groups, it's really important to do a practice like mindfulness right at the beginning of a Zoom session, because some of you are coming right from breakfast, some of you are coming from working out, some of you just woke up, some of you just got in an argument with your kids. We're all coming in here in different ways, different kinds of regulation in our minds and bodies. So we want to all start to tune into each other with the same kind of physiological arousal level and frequency, so that we can really feel like we're much more of a community. And that's also really important in families, are really important in the schools, again, where our kids are maybe doing some of their learning online. We also know that our kids are experiencing a number of different things right now. It's interesting talking to people. I work as a clinical psychologist, so I work with a lot of kids one-on-one. I work with families. I do a lot of consulting with schools, and I'm seeing so many different responses. I do see some anxiety with kids, but what surprises me that I see, or doesn't surprise me, but what I see mostly is a lot of grief and sadness and loneliness. A lot of kids who are upset about the vacation being canceled. A lot of kids who are feeling lonely because they're missing their friends from school. Kids who are sad that their soccer team has been canceled for the rest of the school year, to missing their friends, right? These kinds of things. Again, I think what's important for us adults to do is to really validate what we're seeing in our kids, right? Yeah, that's really sad. Not try to fix it necessarily, right? But really just to acknowledge to our kids that this is a hard time. This is a sad time, really, for all of us. And we're all trying to figure out how we can work our way through it. And it's also, we're seeing our kids maybe regress in a number of different ways. A lot of people are saying their kids seem like they did a few years when they're a few years younger, that their behavior is a little bit more out of control. Maybe in some sweeter ways, the kids are actually more affectionate and respectful with the adults than they were a little bit at younger ages. Or they're getting interested in their old toys that feel really comforting to them, things like that. And so these regressions are also really normal, and actually present new opportunities for us to really be connecting with our kids when they're actually kind of regressing in those more positive kinds of ways. But also really, I just want to talk about more kind of our own ability to self-regulate and manage our own difficult emotions, our own financial fears, or fears about getting sick ourselves, or maybe some of us worry about other people who maybe have compromised immune systems, or people in our families who are aging and elderly who, are much higher risk at this point. And one of the things, again, that I really am aware of is how much anxiety is really contagious for our kids. So I remember when my son was born, talking to the pediatrician and him saying something about, he said, I've seen a lot of anxious kids who don't have anxious parents, but I've never seen anxious parents who don't have anxious kids. And I thought that was really interesting. That certainly really stuck with me for a long time after that. So managing our own emotions. And when we see our kids anxious, I sometimes share this slide, because anxiety is now actually the number one in 3 adolescents in North America has an anxiety disorder. And this says, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. And it's kind of a joke, but I do think that the best way we can help our kids to calm down is, again, whatever it is that we're doing for ourselves, practicing mindfulness, using other resilience skills that we'll talk about in this workshop, right? Then our kids feel safe enough to calm down with us. What we actually do is something called co-regulation. If we're regulating our own emotions, then in fact, we're helping kids regulate their emotions, especially when they're very young. And then over time, as they grow up, they learn how to regulate their own emotions. But they really need us to be able to do that for them. especially when they're very young, and especially when they're having a really difficult time, which we know many of them are in this just really stressful situation. So I want to just continue to talk a little bit about us as well, and what it is that really we can do for our kids. Because again, one of the things that's really interesting to me in terms of the research is that parents, when you practice mindfulness, right, your kids are happier, there's better family communication, there's fewer accidents in the home, all kinds of things like this. And so I just want to kind of just clarify a little bit for those of you who are a bit new, just what is this whole idea of mindfulness. And there's so many different definitions that are out there. But what I like to say is mindfulness is something like paying attention. And now we tell our kids to pay attention, but we're not actually teaching them how to do that. To the here and now, to the present moment, right? And we do that with kindness and curiosity about our experience as well. And again, there's many different definitions that we can have of mindfulness, but those are the ones that really make sense to me. And I think again, like this notion of teaching ourselves and our kids how to pay attention is really key, because our mind is actually wandering off just about half the time. And usually it goes to the past or the future or difficult places, right? Where maybe we're thinking about the future and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job, or my parents are going to lose their job, or I'm going to get sick, or this will never end, or what's going to happen in this situation. Usually we're worrying in the future, right? The past is often where we have a lot of regret, right? Wow, why didn't I buy more groceries the last time I went to the grocery store? Why didn't I, switch jobs a little bit earlier? Why didn't I pull the kids out of school earlier? Right? Or for kids, why didn't I say goodbye to this other friend, or something like that, right? These regrets about the past. When we're in the present, we're much happier, and we're less likely to, kind of rush off with anxiety of the future, or depression in the past, or something like that. So bringing ourselves into the present, and then we do that with kindness and curiosity, right? Just trying to be kind to ourselves, be curious about our experience. Some people also talk about some acceptance and non-judgment, right? We have to accept this situation. We have no choice, right? And accepting a situation doesn't mean that we have to like it, but it certainly means that, trying to fight it in some way is probably going to make us more stressed out and more miserable. But if we try to fight it off, well, that's not going to work, right? If we just try to flee and run away from it, that's another stress response. That's not really going to work, right? We can just kind of give up and say, forget it, but that's not very helpful. And so what I talk about with more mindfulness and resilience is, how do we really attend to our experience and really start to befriend our experience? Because what we want to do is just be here through this, the difficulty, right? Be as present as possible. And we want to ultimately really try to see if we can befriend this experience. Can we learn something from this? Can our families learn something from this? And that, I feel like, is what's really powerful about practices like mindfulness, especially during difficult times like this. So if you're here with me last time, then I talked a little bit about the 3 different ways that we can start to approach resilience, because our mental health is really kind of built on physical health, mental health, and our relational health, the biopsychosocial model of thriving. So we can think about ways that we bring more mindfulness, for example, to our physical health. We can think about doing some mindful walking activities. We can think about doing some mindful eating and cooking activities, that kind of thing. We can think about using mindfulness to help us get a better night's sleep at night. These kinds of practices can be really helpful to us, be really helpful to our families, right? Because again, having a robust physical immune system is also the basis of not just keeping COVID at bay, but also a robust physical immune system is going to be important to having a robust emotional immune system at the same time, to be able to manage and be with all of these difficult emotional experiences that do come up and that will come up throughout this time, which again, 6 weeks, 6 months, hopefully not 6 years, we don't know, right? But what we can do are find some ways to regulate our own emotions. And we can do that by using our body as well. We know exercise actually helps us with our mood. Exercise helps us with our appetite. Exercise helps us with our anxiety, with our stress. So even light exercise for everybody in the family, if possible, can be really helpful. Maybe that's watching some exercise videos or doing some jumping jacks around your apartment or your building, doing some kids yoga videos together as a family. And really encourage you to use this time to do some of these things together as a family too. It's a nice opportunity to model this stuff for your kids as well. And then finding time and ways to do some different breathing practices that also really regulate our bodies. And in turn, what that does is it really starts to regulate our brains and our impulses as well. So I like to say, you can regulate your breath, and that in turn regulates your body, and that regulates your entire nervous system and your brain, which of course starts to regulate your attention, your impulses, and your emotions. And if we can have well-regulated attention, impulses, and emotions, then we can come out of this stronger than we went into this. And so we use the breath, I like to say, like a remote control. And it can feel right now like there's an alarm going off, right? In fact, in our brains, that's what's happening. The amygdala and the limbic system in the brain, the alarm is going off for us and for our kids. And that's actually shutting down our ability to think things through with our prefrontal cortex, to take perspective with our insular cortex, to think in complex ways and see real creative solutions to problems that are in front of us. Again, for kids and for us adults as well. So we want to shut the alarm off in the brain and have the blood flow out of that limbic system in the brain and flow back into those other parts of the brain that help us to think things through and help our kids to think things through and, again, regulate their impulses and emotions and all of that. So I'll share with you a few kind of fun breathing practices that I do with kids, and some of these are coming out of one of the books that you can actually see behind me here, Alpha Breaths. And it's just an alphabet book. I apologize, I'm very tired right now. It's an alphabet book of mindfulness breathing practices, basically. So the alligator breath, which maybe you want to do with your young kids. You can breathe in and breathe back out. Breathing in and breathing back out. Breathing in and breathing out. You can also, some of one of my workshops said you can do baby alligator breaths, breathing in and out. Next letter that I like to share is the butterfly breath. And again, you can maybe just see the image, and then I can also demonstrate here, breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. So we can use our breath. When we regulate our breath, we're actually regulating our emotions and our impulses, calming our bodies down, calming our brains down, keeping anxiety at bay, keeping impulsivity, keeping anger and frustration at bay, and stress, all of that. Okay. Another one of my favorite breaths is the C stands for the hot chocolate breath. And the hot chocolate breath is about as simple as it sounds. You can just imagine you're holding up a bowl of hot chocolate, or maybe coffee if it's morning for you over there. If it's really hot, you can just breathe in through your nose smelling. And breathing out, blowing, cooling off. Breathe in smelling. And blowing out, cooling off. And even my 2-year-old daughter, right? She actually knows what it's like to breathe in smelling something, like her oatmeal in the morning or her soup for lunch, right? And she blows out, cooling it off. So even really young kids can do some of these kind of more fun breath regulation practices that can really help them, again, regulate their emotions, calm themselves down, focus a little bit better as well on whatever it is that they need to focus on. And what else is really important, I think, is to do this stuff together. We do this stuff together before dinner, we do it before bed, we do it before homework, right? So it just becomes part of the routine, part of the habit. Now, of course, also, I just shared a few breathing practices. There are other ways we can really think about practicing mindfulness and sharing mindfulness with kids. We can use our 5 senses, right? So our 5 senses really keep us in the present moment, right? Whereas our thoughts are racing off to the future or going off to the past. So maybe it's just taking time and just maybe, well, we can do this together. Maybe just listening to a few sounds. I'll just ring the bell. Maybe just noticing what's the farthest away sound you can hear right now. Maybe outside of the building. And coming a bit closer, perhaps sounds inside the building. Sounds inside the room. Sound of your own breath. Perhaps even sounds from inside your body, your heartbeat, stomach growling. And then listening back outwards, maybe noticing sounds from the left or from the right. Sounds from above or from below. In front of you or from behind you. I'll just ring the bell once more. And you can just allow your eyes to open and just bring your attention back outward again. So very quickly, right, one of the things that we can do is just by tuning into our senses, this really also calms down our nervous system, focuses our brain a little bit, right? And I'm just noticing just how much more settled I feel just listening to sounds. And some kids that find focusing on their breath really boring, something like noticing sounds, or just looking out the window and notice what you can see that's beautiful or that's green out the window, that kind of thing, right? These sensory practices, or look out the window, notice everything that you can see, each color of the rainbow, something red, something orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Maybe when you are able to take a walk around, right, being able to just take a look for the rainbow colors. These kinds of things help us just to settle in, stay in the moment, not race off to the future, not race off to the past, that kind of thing. We can also help kids in particular around mindfulness use their imagination, right? A lot of people feel like, well, trying to get kids to sit still and meditate, like that's crazy, right? And the interesting study by a researcher many years ago, Lev Vygotsky, he was trying to get, I think it was 8-year-olds to stand still for as long as he could, which is a pretty difficult thing to do. And so he asked these kids, right, stand still for as long as you can. I'm going to time you, go. And of course, 5 or 10 minutes later, the kids are running around all over the place. So they're not kids from Singapore, actually. So, so he calls the kids back in. He says, I want you to stand still for as long as you can, but this time I want you to imagine that you're a knight guarding a castle. And now this time the kids can actually stand still for, right, 15 minutes, almost 20 minutes. So just by tapping into the power of their imagination, right, we can get kids to focus for that much longer. If we make it playful, if we make it even almost a bit of a competition. And I think about this also when I think about that opening meditation that we did, right? Sitting still like a mountain, right? Just watching your breath like the waves of the ocean, seeing your mind clear like the sky, right? It's somewhat playful. It's using an image, right? Or the other things I think about from my own childhood. I never learned the word mindfulness growing up, but I have these memories that were something kind of mindful. I remember just looking up at the clouds in the sky with my dad. And him saying, if you focus on a cloud for a while, you can make it disappear with your mind and change shape. Or walking in the woods at camp, and our counselor said, see if you can walk as quietly as you can, each footstep, not making a sound at all. Maybe the counselors were just trying to get us to walk quietly because they were frustrated with us, but it really worked. And it takes so much focus and attention, right, to just each footstep, right? Absolute silence. Right? You have to really focus on your feet. You have to really focus on each movement of your body. And then sit down in the woods and notice all the sounds like we just did a moment ago. Nice. So bringing it into play. And I do think this is a wonderful time to really bring more play to life with our kids. I think, with the advent of screens, our kids are not doing as much playing as they may be used to. But so many games that maybe a lot of us grew up playing are actually really wonderful teachers. Not only do they help kids cope with boredom, it's how we coped with boredom, but boredom actually leads to creativity. Boredom actually helps us delay gratification, which we know is one of the most important skills that kids can have growing up. Kids who are able to delay gratification actually grow up much more resilient. They're usually less likely to get divorced. They're usually much higher achieving in school, having better jobs, that kind of thing, more stability later in life. All of these things are incredibly important, and they come out of this ability to delay gratification, to not just take that thing that's right in front of you. And this is actually an amazing time for kids to learn how to wait, and for all of us adults to also learn how to wait. People might be familiar with the marshmallow test, where they gave some 4 or 5-year-olds, they said, you can have 1 marshmallow now, and I'm going to leave, but if I come back in 15 minutes later and you haven't eaten the marshmallow, you can get 2 marshmallows. And so it's this very famous experiment, because what happened was the kids that could wait, who came up with strategies, right, 20 years later down the road, those kids were actually able to perform so much better. That was the big study on delaying gratification. And it's also what we're all doing as a society. We're having to kind of wait here for the marshmallow, right? All of us together. And so being bored, all of this stuff is actually great in terms of teaching kids these skills, even though it also might be driving us a little bit crazy to be so bored at the same time. But finding actually, we were so bored that we gave my 5-year-old the marshmallow test with jelly beans last week. Just we wanted to see if he could do it. He did fine. He wanted to do it with 3 next time. But we can play other games with kids. And I don't know what all the cultural games might be in Singapore, but growing up, I think about games like I Spy, Simon Says, 20 Questions, Red Light, Green Light, Mother May I, Simon Says. All of these games that a lot of us grew up playing that we thought of as just being a waste of time, a way to get through 5 minutes, are actually teaching really important skills. They're teaching careful listening, they're teaching focus, they're teaching impulse control, they're teaching social reasoning in a way that all the games on our devices are really not teaching us and not teaching our kids. So I've been really encouraging families just to have some fun with some old, playing some of those old games as a family, and they also bring us closer together as a family. We can bring mindfulness into, sounds like my son might have woken up. We can bring mindfulness into music, maybe just listening to music a bit more mindfully, slowing down as we do really everything. right? With teenagers, for example, I'll suggest put on your favorite song and just listen to one instrument for that whole song for 4 or 5 minutes. Just listen to the guitar, just listen to the piano. And that's 4 or 5 minutes of really good focused attention throughout that whole time. And for teenagers, it's maybe more interesting and more age appropriate than saying, oh, do some hot chocolate breaths or do some butterfly breaths or something like that, right? So bringing it into music, into arts, into sports, certainly in the United States, not that we have any sports happening right now, but so many professional sports players have gotten interested in what they call mental fitness training, and that's really basically this mindfulness practice that they're doing. And then finding ways to just bring mindfulness into really everything that we do. I mentioned the importance of eating during this time for resilience, eating healthy foods and eating at regular times, which helps our entire rhythm and all of that stay predictable, right? Mindful eating is really a helpful thing to do. Mindful walking, working, chores, so many of these other things are really helpful to not just us, but to our kids as well. The other thing that I have been doing more of is integrating mindfulness into games that I'm already doing with kids. And actually, I don't think I have it in eyesight, but I've got, I usually have with me Jenga blocks. People might know the game Jenga. I'll just put it up on the screen for a moment. Right, the game with the blocks, and say to kids, is your breath, does it, when you're breathing in or breathing out, is your hand more steady? Right, and then on some of the blocks, I'll actually write little practices down, like do 3 hot chocolate breaths, or name 3 sounds that you can hear on one of the blocks. So the kids pull out the blocks, and then they're doing a mindfulness practice as they're going. Or playing other games by integrating mindfulness in. I don't know whether Candyland is a game that's popular in Singapore. It's one that we have in the United States, but it's got these different colored squares. And every time you land on blue, you can talk about something that you're sad, or yellow, talk about a time that you were happy. Right? Or you land on purple and you maybe take a mindful breath. You land on orange and maybe you notice a few sounds or something like that. So there are these ways that we can then integrate, for little kids especially, some of these kind of mini mindfulness practices, as I might call them. I'm seeing some of these questions popping up too as well. I'll try to get these as we go too. So mindfulness is really powerful also in terms of, we see so much research in terms of how this is changing the shape and structure of the brain, actually making it more resilient, growing the prefrontal cortex, which is one of the most important parts of the brain, again, in terms of learning, in terms of attention, in terms of emotion regulation, thinking things through, planning, right? Also in terms of the insular cortex, where we do our social reasoning, understanding other people's perspective, things like that, and shutting down that alarm system in the brain. What I really hope happens out of the other side of this is that we're not so anxious all the time, and our kids so anxious all the time, or so emotional and dysregulated and out of routine, that their amygdala ends up being in their limbic system, the alarm system ends up being growing too much and being like an alarm that goes off years after this is all over. This is why practicing mindfulness now can really, really help with that.